Howdy. Welcome to Some Seminarians podcast. I'm Robert Shelton, and I'm joined today with Erick Cruz and Deacon Rafael. We're seminarians for Archdiocese of San Antonio. And today we got an interesting topic to cover. We're going to discuss priesthood throughout the world. It's sounds like a really cool topic of a book or awesome drama movie, but in reality we're just going to be talking about how priests are viewed throughout the world, and a pretty basic thing, and just how priesthood is kind of understood in different cultures, contexts, countries, even areas of different countries. Some countries like the United States are very big, and Texas, we're our own country, and so we interact differently than maybe someone in Montana or California. So with that in mind, maybe we just start off with I don't know, what are some things y'all know are differences about priesthood in the world or compared to the U.S.? Deacon, you come from Puerto Rico.
Sure. Actually, coming from Puerto Rico is a Hispanic culture country. So we have, to us in the Hispanic culture, and I can relate that here, for example, in San Antonio, where we have a very high number of Hispanics as well. But going back home in Puerto Rico, for example, we do have high regards for the priest. And usually people, we in Puerto Rico, for example, for most likely for every activity, every gathering, there is and if there is the presence of a priest, it is very regarded for him to have a very special place in that particular gathering. And usually it is the priest is invited many times to all these family gatherings, and in Puerto Rico, for example, as well as in Hispanic culture, we regard the priest as being actually part of our family, and that relationship between the family and the priest is very people look for it. And the service around the priest is also something that people want to to offer their services to the priest. What can we do to make the church better? If there's something that we need to assist, they will actually offer themselves to the priest. So for us, from the culture I come from, for example, the priest is someone who is a leader. The priest is someone who is highly respected in terms of being with the people. With the people, is I don't know if this will be the correct term, but it's one with us, someone with us, and that walked with us. So if we are celebrating, he'll be celebrating. If we are mourning someone, he'll mourn with us and he'll accompany us. So we will feel this closeness with the priest. That is something beautiful at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think different cultures, and because we're products of our culture, we're products of our societies and our upbringing, even though our faith really is the same. And so sometimes you see people live out, our priests, really exhibit, especially here in the United States, where we're blessed to have so many priests from around the world, missionary priests and things coming here. So you'll notice the stereotypical almost cranky Irish priest, he's just, or you get the Polish priest who's super direct, or you get the German priest who's just kind of all right, we're going, or whatever, I'm trying to do my German accent from other people. Yeah. And then you get priests from India, where someone's just really fun and out there and engaging, and and then you get sometimes get a Texan priest who's super laid back, and so it's interesting. You see how each culture kind of gives off its own gifts and additions to the priesthood. And I think it's great. When I was in Mexico, it was interesting studying Spanish there, seeing how priests interacted and seeing that, and then comparing it to my time here in Texas, growing up in Helotes and whatnot, how priests were, and then even seeing priests from, we had a priest from Colombia at one point. We have Father Roger right now, is at the time of this recording, is the parochial vicar of my home parish in Guadalupe, and it's cool to see the differences between him and Father Scott Janosek, who's a Texas Polish priest. Huge, but it's to see how they both bring out their culture to the best of their ability in serving the people of God, and I think that's just the great gift of our cultures and priesthood throughout the world is, again, these men come from so many different backgrounds and what they can offer, and
it enriches our parish life.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
I mean, I see it in my own home parish with Father Rodolfo and as of recording, Father Gonzalez, Texan, Mexican, and just how those two interact. And I mean, our last pastor was of Irish descent, so like even seeing those differences there, and the way the church kind of grows and lives and changes through these different expressions of priesthood.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's cool because I think that's. I remember I read this or someone told me this when I first entered seminary about how, just the universality of the Catholic churches. I mean, because Catholic meaning universal is really so unique. Like, I'm not throwing shade at our Protestant brothers and sisters, but often Protestants typically tend to have almost a very homogenous, especially in a local area, group, and you see this like in the Catholic. It's really this. You can take a priest from India and send him to Spain, and as long as he knows the language, like he's good.
Yeah.
And there's something I read once. Like I was saying is, this is Catholic universality. It's an Indian priest in an American seminary celebrating mass in Spanish for the Korean martyrs.
Oh wow!
Honor, and that's the universality. But again, but the interesting thing is, how they bring that out. I mean, we're benefit of our seminary education having priests we have a Father Marcos from Puerto Rico. We have Father Tom, he's an Indian. We have some of the Sulpicians who teach us are American. We got a Filipino one. And then how they engage with the culture and say things and bring different aspects to certain feast days, I mean, really just enlivens and enriches us. And I think a lot of us are benefits of that throughout our lives.
And actually, one of the beauty of the priesthood is how to relate to that community that you've been assigned to, for example, and how to accommodate maybe your own culture as a priest to the place that you've been assigned. As you mentioned, I mean, you could be someone sent to someone else, to some place else, and and you have to learn about that new culture at the same time. But that's the beauty also of our church, so we can travel at the same time.
Yeah, and just in that being able to know, like from our personal experience, what that is, right? And just being aware of those things. Like I think of, just like what's. Like, you're mentioning, like, being in Ireland, so you have that view of, like, how the Irish view priesthood, right? And how, I mean, you as a Puerto Rican, how Puerto Ricans view priesthood, but, we're obviously in Texas, right? And so how does the local community view their priests, And I think that's a question us as future priests are going to have to know is, like, well, how people are going to view me and interact with me, This was sometimes actually, I think, the mentality of priests, especially in the 1970s, like not wearing collars, right? It's because, like, I want to be seen as I'm part of the people, right? I don't want to be seen as, like, I'm above everyone because I'm a cleric, right?
Or apart.
Yeah, or I'm apart, I'm separated. Now I think there's the understanding of, okay, well, this marks people, this marks us out, this, etc. I met a priest who was Japanese, and he was explaining to me that in Japan, for instance, kissing is seen as a very almost erotic or sexual thing, right? So they don't kiss in public, really, and so kissing is seen very much as, not something done in public. So they don't kiss the altar, because that's seen again as a more, and so they just kind of bow to it. At least from what I remember he was understanding. So that always made me think that, like, okay, wow. So if I went to Japan and just did that, people might be scandalized, right? And from personal experience, it made me think, like, okay, so you really have to know the culture you're in, and I think as priests, we really have to become men of the world, right? Like, we cannot be insular. I mean, this used to be a thing that you heard about in churches in immigrant neighborhoods, especially you go back 50, 100 years ago, where it was, if you're in a Polish area of, like, let's say Chicago, and you go to confession in the Irish neighborhood, the Irish priest would tell you go to your church.
The national church.
You go to your national church. You don't come here, right? I mean, I've heard many stories like that, but I've never really experienced that. Here in Texas, so I can go wherever I want.
Yeah, well, also because, like, San Antonio in itself is just so mixed and so vast. Like, we were talking about the Vietnamese martyrs earlier. They have a Spanish mass. Which surprised me because I didn't even know there was a Spanish mass there. But just the fact that in the past it was like that just astounds me greatly. But you were also talking about, like, the Japanese thing. Something that came to mind while you were talking about that was just sort of the sort of reverence that's sometimes shown in some cultures. Specifically coming to mind was with the Filipino women, how this sign of, I don't know what to call it, because I don't know what it's called, but the sort of touching their forehead to the priest's hand like that, just that sort of reverence shown is part of that culture. And I remember the first time that happened to me, I was just serving as a seminarian, but just it caught me off guard because I wasn't aware of that being something. And
the significance thinking that you're a priest and you've had the chrism, the consecrated, at ordination. Yeah.
Yeah. It was interesting, but I think it's very true. Like, God willing, we're ordained, but just being able to adapt to the culture is very much important.
Yeah, that kind of common adage of like, when in Rome, do as the Romans do.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's got to be interesting for you, Deacon. Coming from, you've lived here many years, but also
yes.
as your youth, coming from Puerto Rico, which is very close to the United States.
Right.
But I'm sure then coming to Texas, it's got to be. I'm sure you've noticed some differences. So what's something like us Texans, or Tejanos, right, do that's different maybe?
Well, I gotta mention the big difference. For example, in the Hispanic culture, we like and we appreciate very much to bring music to our faith. Mostly, we bring that livelihood of the music and include music in all. We try to do and upbeat music, lively music. On the other side. Well, I don't wanna create a division.
Well, you can call us Germans dour. It's all right.
I don't wanna. I don't mean that. I mean that, for example, in the Texan culture, for example, here, it's quite different. It is a beautiful service as well. However, from where I come from, it is also mixed with that music. Not necessarily that's the case here. That's the major deal that I have seen here in Texas, for example, and obviously right after every mass and every most likely to celebrate with gatherings and having some tacos and food and all that that also helps.
No, but that's true. I think it's showing there's a richness in the diversity, and not diversity in like a the nouveau political sense, but diversity in the authenticity of it, right? The just the richness of the variety. And I think about I was about a year ago I was in New York for a Knights of Columbus conference for college councils, and I got to stay at the New York Seminary, and even just seeing differences up there. And so, for instance, like in New York and things, it's a much more formal culture with priests. Here in Texas, we're extremely laid back. I think it was actually Cardinal DiNardo said something about that. It's popping in my head that there's some interview, and he was talking about how priests in Texas is a much more laid back culture. You're just kind of like, you see priests in short sleeve, clerical shirts. Never saw that when I was in New York ever, and it was like warm. It wasn't like it was cold.
Really?
It was just interesting. The differences of that, or even like music. Here in San Antonio, speaking of just diversity stuff, we got the Liederkranz Choir, which is a German Catholic men's choir, and I had the privilege of this last St. Joseph's feast day in May to celebrate Mass with the German community in Texas, or in San Antonio at St. Joseph's downtown, and Father Klosterkamp, a German priest, celebrated Mass. And it was interesting because you speak about that music, right? So you had the choir, but he sang the entire Mass, and I guess in German he was saying that's very common, that they sing a lot more of the parts.
Oh, wow.
So, it's interesting maybe where that's expressed. And so it's interesting that sometimes we hear things about German that they're very kind of laid back about things nowadays, and we're hearing all this scandals and stuff. But then you look at some of the liturgy, and it's actually in some ways more formal and more integrated with music than maybe just saying it, without any kind of that singing the Mass parts. So, I don't know. There's just differences in how priests and the cultures kind of interact with that stuff. I remember, we have a pastor here in San Antonio, Father Jan Klock at St. Matthew Claret, and he always jokes that I think he made a joke once along the lines of like, we don't use incense at the church because I have enough incense with my smoking, the Polish humor.
Right? Yes, he's great.
But I don't know. I mean, so like, what are some other things we can think of with just differences of priests in the world? Like I'm thinking of, like you talk about music and stuff. I mean, we even have like dancing, right? Like I think in the West, we would think dancing during a liturgical celebration is like verboten. Like, dude, never do it. Like that is like a big time scandal. In Africa, that's a big part of the procession. Yeah, when you process in, it's not just this, we're marching. It is almost like a dance, and you can go find it on YouTube. Just type in like, Catholic Mass in Nigeria, and you go look at the beginning of it.
Yeah, and not only is it just a big expression of culture, it's a form of worship too. And I think someone that actually was here at Assumption, but for another diocese, Father Arenze. I remember seeing his first Mass, wasn't able to attend, but just that joyous song and dance processing down the aisle, which is, I mean, why in Africa Masses are like 3 hours long. But that joy and the expression of love, of adoration of God through moving your body in that way, just it's interesting. And the priest joins along too.
Yeah, it's not just a it's not an exclusivity of we just worship this way in the church. I mean, there are many authentic and good forms of worship, right? And that church hasn't embraced these, right? And understood that in different contexts, perhaps not a good thing. Like you wouldn't do that like in Texas. We wouldn't have dancing during the liturgy. We'd be seen, or some part of liturgy be seen as very like scandalous to people.
Unless it's Guadalupe. With the Matachinas.
Yeah, but that's not during the liturgy. Yeah,
but that's different.
Yeah,
that's different.
No, yeah, and I think it's just since you were speaking of Africa, just not only the way priests presented themselves, but also the way they dress is very different. I remember when I was younger, I was just very, very confused. An uncle of mine was a missionary priest in Africa for many years, and I remember seeing a picture of him in white habit, and I was like, I thought only the Pope could wear white.
Yeah.
So just not even just the way priests act, but the way they dress too can be very different.
Yeah, because different parts of the world, like if you're in the tropics and you're wearing a black cassock or
you
black,
are sweating a lot.
Sweating, it's hot.
Be sweating.
So they typically, like, especially in the Philippines part, that kind of thing. Anywhere along the equator, in South America,
as well.
Caribbean, they'll wear white, like white clerical shirts. White. You'll see this in San Antonio. We got priests from the Philippines and areas, and you'll sometimes see them in white or gray clerical shirts or light blue. Yeah, because it's not just black. Or even just speaking of dress, I mean, even think about priesthood with like religious orders.
Yes.
With like I always jokingly call them the Jedi, the Franciscans.
Yeah.
You got the Jedi, which are like the Capuchins. You got the Sith, which are like the conventuals. Because they wear the darker.
Oh dear.
It's just But it's even how the different religious orders are. I mean, province to province. Even in the United States, you got Dominican province here, and you got the one on the West Coast. They sometimes have very different cultures and characters, and you see this on a macro and micro level. Even in San Antonio, the north side of San Antonio, the parishes are very different from those that are maybe on the far west side, or Del Rio. But again, that kind of, and then you have priests transferring between and sharing. I mean, it's a web of connectivity. But it's interesting to know that, for those who are watching who are discerning, that there is no one model of priesthood, so to speak.
Yeah,
there is
correct.
no one culture of priesthood. There is no just priests are always like this. And you're gonna even on like just a social level, you'll find like all of us have different understandings and different preferences, and you see this. We recently had a talk here in the seminary. Father John Baptiste in the Diocese of San Antonio.
Yes.
He came and talked about that one of the biggest difficulties for him coming from Africa to here was trying to understand the culture contextually with the priests. He's like, I'm alone here in this diocese. How do these other priests like hang out and do things? And trying to figure that out can be very enriching. Like we have some seminarians here for the Diocese of San Antonio. We have Hung, who is a Vietnamese descent, and I was invited to dinner a couple times with him, and now I love Vietnamese food. I love pho. Like, geez, never would have thought in my life. You would have told me when I was in high school or college, discerning, and they'd be like, hey, what, you like pho? And I'd be like, what are you talking about? Now I can tell you all about Vietnamese coffee and food, but that's part of this enrichedness of the priesthood throughout the world.
Yeah, and I think Assumption does that well, where we study for seminary, because we do have people from many different cultures, and their cultures are expressed through they are, and we're open to learning about these things. Like the same as with you.
Exactly.
I knew nothing about the Vietnamese culture before entering here. We have the Vietnamese Martyrs Mass during the cultural day, where we have food that's brought in from different cultures and such. It's very much sort of like a learning process.
Exactly.
Because I think, personally, I think one of the best ways to learn about someone's culture is through their food.
Oh, yeah. Warning, by the way, if you do discern, those watching, and you become a seminarian for Archdiocese of San Antonio, you will likely have to eat balut at some point.
The what now?
Balut.
Oh!
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just go look it up. It'll be a surprise. It's going to terrify you, but it's great. Please try it. But yeah, it was we had a formator who was Vietnamese, and him and the Father Rene, the Filipinos, they got some. But anyways, go look at it. We don't want to ruin it for you.
Before you made that comment, I was about to tell you. He said, "Well, you gave yourself the opportunity to know about pho, and try it, So give it the opportunity and try. So I have to do that too with that.
I'm gonna enjoy this. but that is true. I mean, just learning, that priesthood isn't just one way, and priesthood isn't just the experiences of one area. Yes, the church has been rocked in a lot of ways by scandals in various areas, but that's not priesthood in the larger sense.
No, it is not.
We're also benefit of this diocese. We have priests from the Eastern tradition. We have Father John Meffordry at the Melkite, right? And so how priesthood is viewed. I mean, he's a married priest. That's very rare. I mean, that's a different view of priesthood than us who are celibate.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
We also, priests who are, Americans and priests who, like my mother was German, right? And so you have, immigrants, you got people with mixed backgrounds, you got guys from, Mexican American, Hispanic American backgrounds, Puerto Rican, we got guys here studying for us from Colombia, and it's interesting too that even in the Hispanic context, it's interesting. We have Luis Horacio who's from Colombia, and he doesn't sometimes understand things about the Mexican American or Mexican context, and it's fascinating to understand and see.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a mixture, there's a mix, and like you mentioned, there is no one structured,
we're not cookie cutter.
Exactly.
Priests
we bring ourselves, we bring our culture. And we also enjoy, engaging with the people of God there. With their culture, with their own customs and all that. So it's a two sides, deal. So we can all get together.
Yeah. So don't be afraid if you're discerning or thinking about priest or whatever, that you're gonna have to give up your culture, your background.
Exactly.
Your likes, your dislikes.
You're gonna have to, for instance, I met a guy once who was basically saying, I don't want to become a priest because I don't want to become a Mexican. And I was interesting because he had this understanding that he came from a Protestant background, that Catholics are all just Mexicans.
That's nice.
And this was many years ago, and it was interesting because talking to him, and that is sometimes a true perspective, right? Especially in the Protestant background, someone's like, "Oh, Catholics are all just this," because they're typically the immigrants, right? And that's not the case. You have this, and you can look, and there's this rich background of priesthood, and there's not just one. Again, I've repeated that model of priesthood. For instance, I'm sitting here right now wearing cowboy boots, and I drive a truck. And I'm getting excited for dove season, and then you're gonna have a guy who never wants to hunt in his life, and you're gonna always see him in New Balance tennis shoes. You have a big spectrum, so don't be afraid that you're gonna have to give up your culture or become something new.
Exactly.
That yes, you have to. The first and foremost is the pursuit of the salvation of souls and serving the church wherever that is.
Exactly.
Whether you're from Del Rio to Castroville or Fredericksburg to St. Helena to the cathedral. We're called to serve the people of God in this diocese, no matter who that is.
Yes.
So this is why for instance, we learn Spanish. If you don't speak Spanish, we have English proficiency for those who need to learn better English, and then we're also encouraged to learn about other cultures and faiths and things. And I think Archbishop has been a great model of that. That's why it's very awesome if you go to the Facebook pages of the diocese. play what's that game? Where's Waldo? But play
Yeah.
Where's Archbishop wearing Vietnamese?
Oh.
It's awesome to
Yeah.
see.
Yeah. No, and it's very much encouraged for us to go and do these things. I mean, a bunch of our people from Assumption were helping out at Vietnamese Martyrs this past year. Though it's not a ethnic culture, I was helping out with the deaf community this year. These communities that need our pastoral attention, and we're very much encouraged to learn about these communities, to interact with them, so that we can better pastor them in many ways. And I think that's not only is that just the general calling of a priest to do, but it is very much. I'm myself. I'm just very happy that that's encouraged.
Yeah, and I think it's exciting because it's a I never would have thought 10 years ago when I was first started discerning and then entered seminary, I would have gone to Mexico to learn Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
I would have had all these different encounters. It really is an exciting opportunity, an exciting. It's an exciting world, and we're part of it.
Yes.
And it's just it's awesome, and priesthood is a part of the world in that sense, and it's also lived in the world, and it's so cool and enriching to know about it. So I would encourage you, if you have a priest who's maybe not from your background or culture, go talk to him and find out.
Exactly.
And see, because I think you'll be surprised. And again, for those discerning, encourage you to be excited. And
Yes.
When you get in here, you're gonna have a lot of new crazy brothers from different backgrounds. So but I think that kind of concludes our time.
Yes.
Speaking of different cultures, we're not normally podcast people. And so the culture of the people running the podcast is telling me I need to end it, or else we'll be talking here for an hour. But really, thank you. Please,
Yes.
I don't use social media, so do whatever you do on this thing.
Yeah.
Subscribe, follow.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, watch our videos, and share them.
There you go.
Yeah. Send me a piece of mail. I have an address. Use some stamps.
The snail mail.
Stamps? What's
I
that?
call it snail mail. Snail mail built this country.
I know. I know. But yeah.
But I really thank you for joining
Thank
us.
you.
I hope you learned something. God bless. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.